Not only because we're fans of Sloop Brewing Company, but also because they've sponsored this show, I'm more than happy to read that Sloop Brewing Company operates out of Fishkill, New York, and are brewers of the one and only Juice Bomb, a Northeastern IPA, and other world-class ales and lagers. Visit their Instagram at Sloop Brewing Co. or find their website, sloopbrewing.com, in the show notes.
That was such a professional sounding ad.
Crush that shit.
It's methodical.
Crush that shit. Caffeinated hippies and hipsters alike congregate at this coffee lover's paradise, where you get a buzz just walking in thanks to friendly baristas promptly offering rock-solid brews with a warm smile, with fair prices, occasional live music, and a cozy vibe. There's no wonder it's always crowded with both customers and their pets. It sounds like a poem, right?
He did not write that.
I kind of dig it. I like it. Sounds good.
I didn't write that at all. It was from Zagat, but it sounded like it was a poem to some extent.
It did sound very poetic.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mike Love in the building with us today from Coffee Labs.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to come speak to us today about what?
Coffee.
Literally. Everyone thinks that they know things and they know nothing. Right, Just?
This is true. As I've stated before, I drink a lot of coffee. Unfortunately, it seems a lot of bad coffee. I went to go visit Coffee Labs in Terrytown, thinking I knew what I knew about coffee, and realized I know nothing about coffee.
Yeah, there's definitely there's quite a bit to know, to learn. I learn every day. We opened 18 years ago, and it's just been a constant learning process.
And you opened in the town of Terrytown. Let's paint the picture of Terrytown itself, right? For those listening in Australia and all over the world where we have people tuned in.
One guy in China.
There's one guy in China.
There's
Awesome.
definitely one guy in Korea now, too.
Oh, all right, good. I definitely know some people. There is a Coffee Labs in South Korea.
Oh, crazy.
Just to let you know. And as far as the one Chinese listener, ni hao ma.
Nice.
I actually did some consulting in China. I lived there for 4 months. Helping a new roasting company start up. So basically, let's get back to Terrytown. Terrytown's right at the Tappan Zee Bridge. I call it the Tappan Zee because it's the Tappan Zee, a.k.a. the Mario Cuomo Bridge.
No one's ever going to
the
call
Tappan
it
Zee
that.
Bridge.
Yeah, it's the TZ. So Terrytown's the first exit coming over from Rockland, last exit going to Rockland. Rivertown, it's kind of like that all-American Main Street. You know, tree-lined, old street lamps. Just a great, cool, comforty vibe.
You're not finding Walmarts. You're not finding, like, CVS-type spots, really. Well, CVS is
Yeah,
infiltrated.
we have a CVS. We have a Walgreens. But for the most part, it's pretty much all independent shops.
So you also, though, are heavily into coffee here to the point where you said, I'm opening up a coffee spot, Coffee Labs, in 2003 here.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, what was Terrytown, though, at that point?
Oh, my God. So Terrytown had gone through a pretty big change as far as GM pulling out of Sleepy Hollow, which really maintained Sleepy Hollow and Terrytown with the employment, businesses. Once they pulled out, kind of died. It was antique shops. It was the Greek restaurant, the tea shop.
And us.
Yeah, and that was it. So we really just decided this was the perfect place, and it was antique shops. And slowly we kind of saw the curve in Terrytown. And of all the river towns, it's really, without a doubt, the most lively town with the music hall. It's just great.
As time goes on, too, all these, I want to say smaller towns wind up having these nice features that start being built upon. I mean, how long Mamaroneck was a source for food in my day being here 15 years ago or so, right?
Yeah, but actually, when I was a kid, there wasn't much going on in Mamaroneck on the Ave, really. There was really not a reason to go down there except for Sal's. And the movie theater at that time they did have, but other than that, there wasn't really anything there. But now you're seeing a boom, and I think it's that similar to Terrytown. It's a vertical village, so you just shoot that street right down to the water. Same way Terrytown, kind of everything goes right down to the water. So it's nice.
So location-wise, I mean, you can be in a better spot now, but let's scale back to coffee real quick too, and not real quick. We should spend a lot of time on coffee, I think.
Yeah.
You got into this business after working in restaurants.
Yeah.
What triggered that, though?
Well, as you guys know, because all from that alternate universe of the restaurant world, it was basically I was burned out. I'd worked at a bunch of restaurants. There was the last opportunity was, blah blah. We're expanding. This great opportunity. We all know the drill. And then we got a great write up from the New York Times. And a month later, I was handed a severance check, and I said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this for anyone anymore." And it was for coffee. If I was going to do coffee, it was going to be roasting coffee. Just like grabbing stuff from a farm that you would cook within a kitchen. Roasting coffee was just another culinary outlet for me and creative outlet.
So you were a chef before? Yep. Okay. Cool.
But you said you got your severance check, and then you were like, well, now I'm a coffee roaster. I'm just here. This is what we're doing now.
Yeah, my wife currently was my girlfriend, fiance, partner. We just kind of decided, let's go to a coffee show. Let's go to the Specialty Coffee Association of America show. See if this is really something that we could mold into and fit into and really do. And we were really fortunate. We found a bunch of service industry misfits, corporate misfits. It was like, oh my God, this is like the restaurant world, but in a much more relaxed environment.
Which is ironic.
Yeah. So after we went to our first coffee show, we solidified the idea. And in 2000, we started searching for a place. We found Terrytown's location and just kind of moved on.
Did you know anything really about coffee before you went to that show, though? Or were you doing research for some time period? Or was this
Did a little bit of research. I lived in Europe for a while. After we decided we were going to do it, I was fortunate enough to get an internship at a coffee roasting company out in Queens, which was Dallas Brothers Coffee. Been out there since like the 1920s. Spoke to David Dallas, the owner of the company, and he basically, I did like 6 months apprenticeship roasting with their small specialty batch roaster. Learned a lot, realized it was time, temperature, airflow. I'm like, okay, this is totally doable. It's just cooking another farm product and another consumable. So I was like, yeah, this is great. And I don't have to deal with like individual plates and expedited, none of that.
So out the gate too, did you, after you left the apprenticeship, at that point you said, all right, it's time that I do my own thing?
Yep. We had already been in the process of getting the location, the lease.
Oh, so it wasn't even out of the backyard for a little bit or the garage before actually
it was
taking
about,
the jump?
I was out of the restaurant business probably a year and a half. And then boom, we did Coffee Labs.
Oh, wow. So the idea of the name from Coffee Labs was?
So in the morning, at the time, my wife was working at Dragonfly Cafe in Pleasantville. She was working in a coffee shop. I did some recon work in that time being at the Green Monster. And that's, I don't know, it's the research that she was doing. Everything just kind of leaned into this was the perfect match. And then we left one day. I went to the shop, came back to the house, left a large coffee next to the bed. We had 3 Labradors, 2 blacks, and a chocolate. Denali was a chocolate lab, and she had a really soft mouth, and she basically just popped the lid and drank the cup. Turns out we called the vet because she had a history of eating and doing stuff. Said 5 gallons in one sitting for a 65-pound dog. Okay. No toxicological. If we do this, let's call it Coffee Labs. Play on words. We roast coffee. Our dogs drink coffee, hence the dog and the coffee. Coffee Labs.
That's funny.
So the dog was okay, though.
Yeah.
All right, good.
So it sounds like the dog can eat or drink 5 gallons of coffee in one sitting before they have any like negative.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
For a 65-pound dog.
Yeah.
That's
5
crazy.
gallons is a lot of
That's a lot.
coffee.
That's
Yeah, I mean, I can't drink 5 gallons of coffee.
So all right. So now you've got your name, you've got your lease being built up at this point, and the last piece of the puzzle though is like you've got to source this coffee. Where are you wholesale buying it from these events?
So
or?
at the time, I had worked out a deal to buy coffee from Dallas because they sold green coffee as well. So with that and going to my next show, I kind of met more people and had been roasting. And I had met a couple importers and just started getting access to more coffees, better coffees. From that point, it was really 2005, I took my first trip to Mexico. I had met a processor. He invited me down. He was working with a really sustainable program down there as far as tracking coffee.
Two shots right there.
Two
guys.
shots.
There's a game here. Every
Okay.
time sustainability is mentioned, you got to take a shot.
Okay, perfect.
In this case, it might be espresso.
Okay, fair enough. So we head down to Mexico. We bought our first coffees and continued to meet people. I was invited to be a judge, a tasting judge, cupping. That's basically like a wine tasting, sniffing, slurping, spitting.
What do you look for in this?
Yes.
That's probably a whole hour talking itself.
So basically what you're really looking for when I purchase coffee is cleanliness, sweetness, balance, aromatics, mouthfeel. Those are really the key thing is the sweetness and the acidity and cleanliness. That really is what I'm looking for. Dirty cups are going to be dirty cups. So you want something to be really clean and balanced when you drink it. So that's kind of what I look for. We go on the same scale as like Wine Spectator, and it is. I need a shot for that one. I really don't like to associate coffee with wine, which a lot of people do. Coffee's a final product. Wine gets better. It doesn't die. But there is a scale that we go on. 85 and above to 100 is considered specialty coffee. Anything below an 85 is considered commercial coffee. And then it gets even lower than that.
What grade do restaurants typically put in?
Commercial pre-ground.
Is there a number that you wind up seeing that at, or no?
Most coffee you find in restaurant situations is really just commodity coffee.
Okay, I was waiting for you to be like, yeah, they put 12. They put a 12 in there. Which, I know, we all know that typically it's like the last thing looked upon in a restaurant is putting a quality cup of coffee on the table at the end of the day.
And it's honestly, it's always been offensive. Even before I was in coffee.
You get your hand chewed off for not putting the garnish on the dinner plate, but then you bring out this shit coffee to somebody at the end of the meal.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine. The people that bring out espressos that have none of the beautiful, delicious cremas that are on top, and they put in a lemon peel on the side. That espresso romano is what some places call it. It's a farce, people. It's a farce. They don't do it in Italy. So I'll give you a quick little history on that one. When first-gen Italian Americans came over, there were no espresso machines. They were still drinking cowboy coffee and brewing it super strong, but it was a really muddy cup. The lemon brought that acidity that they were used to from quickly extracted espresso. That's how it's an Italian American thing that ultimately faded off.
So it was designed to be a mask.
Yeah, for really shitty coffee.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. I'm sure in your industry too, though, there's a lot of different ways that people can mask terrible coffee, no?
Yeah. There's lots of ways. A lot of it is French roasting coffee.
Which is?
Really dark roasted coffee. You'll generally see French roast at, Dunkin' Donuts or on the shelves. Why? Because it's just dark. People grew up with kind of drinking murky, dark, funky coffee. So that appeals to an older generation. Younger generation, I'm almost 50. So my generation is kind of likes a little bit different of a cup. And people even younger than me that are coming into the coffee industry, it's a very different. They want almost like tea-like, really light, sweet, bright coffees. That murky, muddy cup just doesn't do it.
Do you, and not to make a reference to Blockbuster Netflix, do you pay attention to these trends, though, that are happening with the youth, considering that, you know, these are your clientele at the end of the day that start coming in and hanging out at your coffee location and sitting and doing, you know, whatever urban hipsters do, right?
Yeah.
How many times do you raise an eyebrow and go, what are they doing now?
Quite a few. It's just, they consider them second waivers. That was the coffee phase before I came in. I came in during what they call the third wave of coffee, which focused on different extraction methods, roasting lighter, just really just all over the place experimentation and playing, and refining the art of extracting coffee. Now it's coming into the fourth wave, the next generation of coffee, which is, I don't know. I just read an article the other day, and I'm gonna try it. There's a certain amount of pressure you're supposed to extract espresso at, which is 9 atmospheres, and you're supposed to use a certain weight depending on what size basket, so on and so forth. There's a crazy science behind all of it. And now people are using lower pressures to extract coffee, and it's extracting coffee at a different water level. So not such high pressure. When you put 19 grams in a 21 gram basket, it roughly leaves 3 to 4 millimeters gap. Once that water hits that compressed puck, it expands. The coarser, tighter the grinds are, depends on water flow. Coarser, of course, is going to pass through. Finer, it's going to pass through much slower, give you a big, rounder flavor. It's almost like people are trying to replicate an Americano, which is water and espresso, right out of the espresso machine. Once again, everybody plays. We were into pour-overs for the longest time. Now we're slowly fading them out. Inconsistency, human error.
Justin told me something interesting.
Yeah, I was actually explaining to him when we visited Jefferson. Jefferson did
He's the man.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah, he's been with us. I don't know how many people you guys know who have held jobs in service industry. He's been with us 13 years. Mm-hmm. He's, literally a rock star.
That's awesome.
He's amazing.
Because besides him, I don't think we had an employee that was there that long.
Dan's kind of catching up. Dan's
yeah, you're right. He's getting up there.
Up, yeah.
What were you? You were like 10 years, right?
I think I was with you guys for 11 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was 11 before he ended up going. And Dan's
got to be there by now.
Yeah, he's got to be 9 or 10 coming right up. But that's it. Other than that, it's pretty good. We were talking about, we visited Coffee Labs, and he did a pour over for us, which I actually have never seen before. And he had it all hooked up with the scale, and then it had the iPad.
Yep.
And I'm watching, this is a whole science behind this cup.
So you got to explain what a pour over is, because he kind of explained it, but probably better.
So basically, it's a funnel, a cone that sits on top of a glass server range. A filter goes in it. Originally, they were called Melitas. Then Hario came out with one slightly different design. Melitas are flat on the bottom. Harios are completely conical. There's a bunch of different designs. Calitas, so on and so forth. But it's basically a filter. You put the coffee in the filter, and you slowly pour coffee via basically a pour-over kettle. It has a very specific style spout that allows it to flow out at a nice, even flow rate. And it's basically 3 minutes. You pour it over, you get all the coffee grinds wet like it would be in a normal machine, and then you slowly start passing water over it in a circular motion.
You said 3 minutes. I was at a place, we won't mention the name of the place yet. However, the coffee machine was down, and I noticed that the coffee wasn't ready, as it usually is for me by the time I arrive. And I'm looking in the back, and I see the kid just moving his arm around, just pouring water over grinds manually. And I was kind of just looking at him like, what's happening here? Where's my coffee? I wound up sitting there for about 7 minutes or so while he was doing this. I was appreciative of the cup because I was thirsty, and it was the morning, and that's how I start my day. But that is exactly what he was doing then, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And the sole reason of doing such would be?
Different methods of extraction, extract coffees in different ways. So I could brew you an espresso with the same coffee, then brew it on the batch brewer, like a normal drip coffee, then move it over to Kyoto, the Japanese ice strippers, pour over, siphon. They're all going to slightly extract different ways just because of the methodologies.
And that extracting differently ultimately results in
Different flavors in the cup.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So when he was doing that pour over, though, he was following what looked like a graph.
Yeah, a flow chart.
And what was he trying to hit there?
So you're basically all those coffees that you saw on the iPad, and with the scale is connected Bluetooth. So as it's all teared out, it's programmed recipes. So whatever he's using, he could pull up. It'll show the baseline for what we've designated as that brew profile, and then he'll try to pour along that rate. The reason why we're getting rid of it, everyone pours different. They're just inconsistent. Mm-hmm. That's all I could say about them. We've just come to the realization that they are inconsistent. Our siphon program, on the other hand, that's a very different. We have a very systematic way of that. There's no real human error to that.
What is a siphon?
It's basically a vacuum pot where the water is in the bottom glass vessel, the coffee's up top, heats the water into the top vessel, and then it goes back down when you take it off the heat. So it goes through a filter. All the coffee grinds stay up, and your vacuum pot of coffee comes at the bottom.
There's so much crazy nerd technology out there when it
This
comes to
sounds super
actually
intense.
doing things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I mean, I was doing frozen lattes with liquid nitrogen a couple months ago. People love that.
what's something like that go for?
That was, I come in
love.
randomly and I competed for 8 years as a barista, so like flair competition, but for coffee.
Awesome.
That was called the Ultimate Barista.
Ultimate Barista Challenge, yeah.
So I saw again when we visited. I saw that. I said I wasn't aware there was this whole world out there.
Oh yeah, I've competed Russia, China.
Wow.
You think it's gonna be an Olympic sport pretty soon?
Should be surely interesting.
I think
at least,
bartending should be too,
for energizing, I guess.
What are they? What's the competition like? What are they doing?
So the Ultimate Barista Challenge was basically set up as a culinary competition. After a couple of them, they designated ultimate baristas that had won consistently. So you get to go, you and I go on stage. You have one station, I have another. It's a latte art category. You've seen Jefferson do it. Frozen drink, espresso, and specialty creative drink, your signature drink. So basically, we would go at it in whatever challenge you and I would go. Whoever wins that challenge, it's judged right then and there. Your hands raised, you move on. Then you get to basically pick, like Iron Chef, who you want to challenge.
Face next. So, but do you get to bring the product as well, or they give?
Yeah, you bring your own stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Do you have some of these trophies on the wall somewhere?
Oh, I have all of them.
Love it.
All of them. Yeah.
What were some of your winning drinks?
You win trophies, you hang them up.
The edible latte was a reverse spherification on a chocolate molded tasting spoon with a hazelnut brittle.
Say that again, but twice as slow, so I
Okay.
can picture this.
Okay, so we basically I took a latte mixture, then
Which is
I used heavy cream for this one, espresso.
just trying to dumb it down
And
as much as
sugar.
possible.
So I took all this basically cold latte, put it in a bowl, mixed it, and did a reverse spherification. So if you guys are into like molecular gastronomy, it basically turned out like an egg yolk. So it had a thin shell, little tasting spoons you get at, parties. It's like almost like Chinese soup spoons, Just did a bunch of chocolate molds, put them in there, sprinkled it, served it. I try to do things like I did when I was a chef. Anyone could just put out a dish. I cook steak, you cook steak. Everyone cooks steak, put it on a plate. But how do you reinvent that? How do you give someone that same experience, but not in a cup?
Yeah.
So that was, Adria Ferran, Wiley Dufresne. There's a lot of chefs that I kind of look up to, and I consider like, okay, they're doing this with food. I still have this strong culinary background. How do I do that here?
So, spoon work.
Yeah, spoon work.
That's a nice way to tie it in.
One of the drinks that Ferdinand Metz, I won with. Ferdinand was a judge from the French Culinary Institute, and it was an espresso pisco sour. I'd just gotten back from Peru. The horrifying point of like an espresso pisco sour is you have to add lime juice to espresso. So now you're playing with really two volatile citrus acidic things. And it won. It was a great drink. I've repeated it in Russia. Tiramisu frappe.
That sounds amazing.
So basically served in a shake glass with lady fingers. And I basically made my own ricotta filling and did the whole blended thing with vanilla gelato. Basically, it's just reinventing things that you might not normally think of as a coffee.
It sounds like being a chef has really resulted in you being able to have a leg up on competition as far as presentation on things.
100%.
No?
Well, also presentation, but also when it comes to, we could all roast coffee. I could show you how to roast coffee and get you on a pace and just repetitive of doing it. When it comes to blending coffee, that's a whole nother ballgame. It's like putting things together, and that's where my culinary background comes. Our blends that we have for our coffees, it's hard to blend coffees because you're dealing with different roast times. Are you pre-blending? Are you post-blending? Are you two different roast and then post-blending them? You have to figure out how all these coffees individually work with each other or how they're going to react in the coffee roaster together. So blending is where I think the culinary background, wine, and just palate really, really come into play.
When I do infusions with various spirits, I have a log journal. So with that said, with that said, with my log journal, I record how long I've let something sit in any spirit. And,
Absolutely.
I'm going through a tasting period here too, and I say, all right, so next time I know that I need to turn this back or I need to turn that down. So when you're doing something with a blend where you're saying that the end result is completely different every time, then you are literally kind of keeping some type of log then.
Everything. So there's fully automated coffee roasters. We actually have a profile system on our roaster, thermal couplings that go to it. So basically it's almost like the pour over system, but much easier to control. So everything's designated. We can pull up the profile and then they'll roast it manually by following the curve.
Okay.
So everything's tracked. I could look back at different days, if there were any variations with airflow, if it was a humid day, it records everything in the environment.
That's cool.
Inside and out. So with that, we have a super detailed record. And then couple that with all our cupping notes and tasting notes, we have journals going back years. So we can compare coffees from year to year to year. There's a lot of 90% of the farms I deal with, I fly to. I'm 3 months on the ground every year. So it's not like I'm just buying coffee from a warehouse. We're buying coffee direct off the farms and signing contracts with farmers in country.
That was one of the questions I had, because when you have a pretty extensive menu at the shop.
Yep.
flavor profile going all over the place from what people would be used to everywhere to like some crazy.
Like we have some coffee from El Salvador. It's 12 ounces from Ada Botley's farm, $63.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And some really good profiles too. Like I don't remember the one that we tried, but it had like a sour flavor to it, which I like sour beers.
Right.
So like I had that one. This is good for me. But we didn't choose that to serve at the restaurant because I don't think everybody would have.
And
enjoyed
I'm the
it.
same way. When I buy coffees, I can't. I've had a couple of years that I've bought long, and I've bought stuff that was to my taste.
Right. Yeah, you have to.
I got to keep in mind, I'm not buying for me.
And my question was going to be when you go out and you source the coffee fruit, which I also learned was a fruit.
Yeah, it's a cherry
always thought it was a
varietal.
bean.
Coffeus arabicus is a cherry varietal.
And so you just answered that though. So you actually go to the farms.
Yeah.
And like actually see what's going on.
Yeah, we leave. We just booked our trip. We leave March 5th to go to Hyderabad in India.
Wow.
So
So you're all over the place.
Yeah.
You have some Colombian. You have some.
This will make 38 countries.
Wow.
how do you determine what farms you're going to use for your beans? Like, are you looking for? I know you're looking for obviously what's in season, what's fresh, but as far as like the taste and the flavor, how do you determine where it's going to come from?
So I was fortunate enough to get involved early in a event that was done by Cup of Excellence program, which basically goes in the countries, goes through a national cupping program. They eliminate coffees. Then they bring in international judges to cup with the nationals, regrade these coffees, bring them down to the top 20, and then put them up for full buy auctions. Not one bag, but you have to buy all of it. So when you're talking about, we're going through 80 different cups of coffee, 110 different cups of coffee at times in different countries. I have to cup as a job to do my best to get the best coffees through where we're all calibrated as a group. But there's a lot of coffees that you'll find and I'll find that will never make it to the top 20 just because there's 18 other cup judges. Highest and lowest score gets dropped out. Everything gets averaged. So I started, and I will give him credit for this. I kind of followed, you all guys know Stumptown.
Yeah.
So when Dwayne owned Stumptown, he was going and judging COEs, then finding these offshoots of great coffees that never make it all the way. You cut a deal with those farmers. Next thing you know, you now have your own booklet and resource files of farmers that you've met, connections, and it just kind of goes like that. Now I go down, I know a lot of the farmers, kids, wives, families, moms, dads. I stay at the farms. And that's kind of how it really plays out. So I do sign contracts with farmers just because of logistics, but if I go down and I find your coffee amazing, we could work out a good price, I'm going to shake your hand and we're rolling for 5 years. And we could flow up and down. The minute one person gets greedy or two and it doesn't work out, which happens, we part ways. A lot of the farmers I've been with have been over 5 years, 6 years.
How many? I mean, you're the Frank Lucas of coffee sourcing,
Sounds
right?
like it.
Cut out the middleman and go straight to the source. But with that said, how many other guys out there are just maybe buying something wholesale? They're not really sourcing these farms like this.
A lot.
Is that the majority, you think, of people, or?
There's like the top 10% of coffee houses out there that are at the same level of buying.
Okay.
A lot of people don't have access. At any given point, I could have, $120,000 tied up in inventory, plus paying 3 cents a pound storage fees because I can't store this coffee, all of it. And having access and to be able to leave your store, travel, and get involved in things like that, you really have to say, this is what I'm going to do. Because it's easy to call you up at an import warehouse out in Jersey or Staten Island, say, hey, send me your offer sheet, just like you get from a fish vendor, produce vendor, or fossil farm, any of those things. You go through and you pick out coffees. You talk to the seller, at the importer. What are you liking? Blah, 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 blah. You have the relationship and you get to know, and they get to know what you like, and you buy commodity coffees or specialty or just below specialty. Some of the importers do have high end, but it doesn't move as quick.
So at what point in your location were you able to kind of get out of being on site and start, I guess, purveying your own coffee?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Like I said, 2005, I made my first trip to Mexico. 2006, I was in Peru. And just kind of kept going from there. And then the Cup of Excellence programs went through Nicaragua, Brazil, Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama. Had a Best of Panama, which was almost like a Cup of Excellence. And that's just kind of how it got going. And I figured if I was going to be a chef, I'm going to come to your farm, whether it be produce, livestock, and I'm going to source it direct. It's the same thing with coffee. It's just not local. It's local in my mind. This doesn't grow here, and I'm dealing with local people in small local communities.
I was today years old, right, when we found out that coffee actually is a fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's a ton of people listening to this too that are like, what are you talking about? It's a fruit. This thing almost looks, you said it before, like a cherry or
It looks exactly like a cherry.
So how do
Does it taste like a cherry too before it's all roasted off?
Yeah, when you have the skin, the mucilage, everything, and all the sugars have really built up from sitting and ripening and getting its full maturation on a tree, a shrub. Actually, they're not trees, they're shrubs. Yeah, they're really sweet, can be tart. Some could be, kind of like a sweet tart sour.
So is the bean, though, inside of that fruit?
Yes.
It is.
So if you look at a coffee bean and see a coffee bean, there's always one round side and one flat side.
Yes.
Boom. They come in twins. They grow flat side to flat side. There's 2 seeds in each cherry. Now, going to the weird one, pea berries. Pea berries are generally really tiny beans, and there's only one. So basically there's a weak one and a dominant one, and the dominant one survives, and it only grows but so big. Very different flavor profile, really sweet, bright, cocoa, pineapple notes to it, depending on which country it's from. So a lot of the agriculture around the coffee and how it's being pollinated also has an effect.
So how do they get the bean out of the fruit piece, though?
Despulpador. So it's basically a big pulper.
Okay.
So you could adjust the grates to the screen size, and that determines how much skin and mucilage you would then take off the cherry, to only then put in a fermentation tank, ferment it 18, 12 hours, depending on what you may be looking for in that coffee, or if you have a relationship with the farmer to talk about different processing. And then it would go into a drying bed. It would get dried, stripped, down to the parchment, and then it would sit until it's ready to ship in its pergamino, oro. So there's like a silver skin around it. Once it's out of that, then it needs to be roasted.
What generally happens to the rest of the berry, since you're just harvesting the seed on the inside?
So, different processes. That one, a lot of that pulp and mucilage goes back into compost. So a lot of that, everything kind of stays within the farms generally. Then you have different process. Naturals, which are ripe cherries just picked and put on raised screened beds and then moved around every few days until they just dry up. All those sugars and volatile acids get soaked into.
You probably end up with a much more robust flavor with that one.
Yeah, really fruity, bright acidities. Then you have honey process. So now you're going to strip X amount of skin and mucilage, and then you're going to put it on a raised bed with all that kind of meat and funk around it, and that's going to dry, and that's going to get caramelized and sticky and clumpy and like really sugary. That's a honey process, and there's yellow honeys, orange honeys, red honeys, black honeys. It's just a matter of how long they're basically sitting them on the patios or on the raised beds on the patios. There is so many different ways to process coffee. A couple years ago, Brian Oriana and myself started doing anaerobic processing. So we're basically filling with cold water, sealing it airtight, and fermenting in a cold space in his bodegas, and then fermenting it that way, which has caused an amazingly super clean, very clean finish, good mouthfeel, but crazy balance.
As we, I think, become a little bit more environmentally conscious, or just conscious in general of bigger businesses that are coming around and just gaining so much power just in their own tumbleweed effects, I think over the last few years, I've noticed a lot more coffee shops pop up. And I think you guys could agree with me that they're popping up in every little town there is. And not only that, but they're crowded. They're filled with people. Conveniently, and I'll say this, I put my order into Starbucks from my phone, right?
Yeah.
With doing that, it's ready for me. I pick it up, and I just keep driving off. Because parking's hard to find at the end of the day.
Everywhere.
So
and we're all in small. This is a small area. Parking's a headache everywhere.
Sure. And now this is, being that people are a little bit more conscious, if they can, a lot of times they will go to a more privately owned place and support the local community and whatnot. What's the name of the place right here in Mamaroneck that opened up?
Roasters.
Mamaroneck Coffee Roasters.
There we go. Roost just opened up by me in Stamford. Nice little coffee house on the corner. There's also another one through town, too, that's pretty well known. But these places are full every time I drive by. Yep. I know your place also gets pretty packed up, too.
Yeah.
This just supports a different environment.
It's a gathering place. It's a communal space. Like, the big joke is we manage it for Terrytown. It's really Terrytown's shop. We're 3-star green restaurant certified. We try to do as much, and we don't market it because it's not something, I don't know. Being sustainable, I don't feel like I want to, things could almost be greenwashed. So when people ask us, I'll be more than happy. We don't have any plasticware in the house. Straws are corn-based. All our silverware is actual cutlery. Clamshells, recycled cardboard. We're 3-star green restaurant certified. We compost all our spent grinds with stone barns. We do as much as humanly possible that we could afford to do. Because if you can't afford to do it, then it's not sustainable. We recycle the bags. People use them for planting, for flower beds, make handbags with them. It's just,
So you're not pushing that down everybody's throat though when you walk in. Like if you walk in, you're not like, oh, we do this and we do that and we do that.
no, there's like little
So
things.
that's just out of genuinely wanting to be that way.
Yeah.
Not just to be a selling
It's
point.
how we don't. I
'Cause
know this
places
is going
do
to
that,
sound
you
crazy,
know?
man. We don't have paper napkins in our house. We don't have paper towels in our house.
I didn't even notice that. I was sitting there. It made
Yeah.
no difference to me.
Like in our home, we don't have any plastic Tupperware. Everything's glass. I have a microwave. This just kind of, it came with our new house. But our lifestyle at home, we just translated everything we liked and believed in into Coffee Labs and hoped everyone would kind of, we didn't
on
have
board with it.
we didn't have a design team or
Right.
anything like that. We just put us into it and hope everyone kind of jumped on board, and they did.
So we were just going through all the different flavor profiles from different beans and everything. you have a wholesale operation as well
Yep.
outside of the shop, right?
Oh yeah.
How important do you think it is for restaurants to realize that they can match the coffee flavor with what they're serving, or that kind of thing? Do you think it's important, or should
So I think when we had a brief discussion about when you go to a restaurant, it's important. You make so much money off that cup of coffee. And honestly, I don't know if any of you people out there, the restaurant owners, management, those K-cups, do the math on them. Do the math on those things.
I was a victim of K-cupping for a while, and then I purchased my own cup that you would put into the machine.
Yep.
So I could put my own grinds in there.
Yeah.
And then I would use a coffee grinder so I could get a better
Fresher cup.
of coffee. Those K-cups are disgusting.
Yeah.
Not only that machine itself, I felt like kept on giving me shittier and shittier cups of coffee as time went on. Maybe that's because I wasn't maintenance appropriate.
It's hard to keep those things clean and really, and most people, you have the thing for speed and efficiency. You're using it because you're in a rush. You're not going to take all that precious spare time you have and clean the damn thing. That's really what it boils down to. I want an amazing experience from the hostess to the apps to the drinks to my dessert. And with my dessert, I want a good cup of coffee. And I was victim of that. And, I was part of that when I was in the restaurant business. You look at ground coffee. Once you grind coffee, you're talking about 6 hours before it really starts to degrade. You could flush it with nitrogen. You could put it in the bag with a one-way valve. It's ground. Think about it. You have a whole coffee bean. It's only being exposed as a whole coffee bean. You grind it into an auto drip setting on a 16 screen size coffee bean. You're looking at roughly, I don't know, just under 2,000 particulate. So now you have all this air and atmosphere around all these little bits of coffee, only to give off aromatics and everything else. Once you crack an Anastar, you really smell it, but then it starts to go. Same thing with coffee. Once you grind it, you're losing aromatics, flavor, everything.
So what about this stuff that's already ground, comes out of the bag that most people order in restaurants? I have my coffee machine at my bar in Stanford right next to the service well.
Mm-hmm.
They brew the batches of coffee, and it always just smells like it's just burnt at the end of the day. Is that something we're doing incorrectly in making that coffee, or is it just because the grinds are that terrible?
Because the coffee was that terrible, because most likely they bought commodity coffee, so you're looking at the commodity market right now really sucks for coffee.
What does one of those bags cost, do you think?
27 cents, 28 cents.
Okay. So as long as you brew a batch, you sell one coffee, you've already made some profit on it to some extent.
It's a huge profit margin on coffee.
What is that profit margin?
And you guys,
I don't know.
I could say in a restaurant, you're probably looking at like $3 profit margin once you take out the labor. It's a huge.
Yeah.
Same with desserts, man.
We were victim.
You hire an amazing pastry chef, but you serve it with shit coffee. Why?
No, we were victim to the same thing, which is why we came and gave you a visit. Plus, I stopped. I started drinking the coffee more at the restaurant, and realized it was just not that good. and we think it's very important. The end of your experience at the restaurant is just as important as everything else, if not the most important thing, because it's usually the last thing that you remember.
It's the send-off.
Yeah,
So for sitting here and can I get a cup of coffee, and it's been sitting in the pot for 5 or 6 hours or whatever is happening, and then you give it, and that's literally the last thing that they had at the store was not as good as and everything else, and then they leave and it's kind of unsatisfied.
We have 40-minute timers on all our coffees. If it lasts that long. Decaf usually lasts up to about the timer once it slows down around 10. But none of the coffees really hit those timers. We just rip through them.
You're talking about coffees in multiples. How many coffees?
Three coffees a
types?
day we brew. So we brew a decaf and then a number 1 and number 2, and that's usually dealer's choice when they come in the morning.
It's the closer, for us. right? Coffee.
Totally.
So that's why we're getting into it. And the closer increases your check averages, and everybody's happy, and you get all that stuff. It's just like baseball.
If you could push this out and say, and just give someone a little notation and say, hey, this is from this coffee roaster, wherever you may be from. You know, this is from Coffee Labs, and this is from this particular farm. If the server upsells that about you have a farmer direct, just like you know where you got the beef is coming from or anything else that you ate during that meal, it's a story to tell.
True.
And with stories, people get emotional, people feel better, and people want to pay more because they associate that dollar with a face.
And on your website, too, I did note that you do have some of the faces of the guys that you deal with. Like right there on the farm. So you know that it's being sourced from there, too. And what we're saying, too, here in the restaurant is when I was a kid and I would work in restaurants, I didn't know too much about coffee. I would walk over to a table and I'd say, "I'll be right back. I'm brewing your fresh batch of coffee." Like, that's sounding appetizing and great, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a good cup at all. And I could tell it was not a good cup looking back at it now. And just, I remember that stench in my nose of what that coffee smells like. How hard is it for a company to get an account with you or anybody else for that matter that actually has better coffee?
It's actually not. You really...
Justin said you put him through hoops when he came over to Coffee Labs.
He said he had to take a test when he was done.
Education.
I didn't say any
Listen,
of that.
It's a matter of, I was real aggressive with accounts before, and now it's come to, we do have a good wholesale account. We have accounts, and we have a great online. It's just a matter of emailing. Come in and sit with us. I don't like to send samples because
You don't know how
I don't know how they're going to brew it.
Right.
And I could tell you how to brew it all day long, and you're still not going to brew it the way I tell you to do it. So come in, you sit down. We chat, we have some coffees, taste some stuff, talk about what you like to maybe drink and eat or what you serve at the restaurant, and kind of balance that out and pair it up. What do you like? What do your customers feel they want? And then let's run a couple test batches through, see what the customers really react to.
When someone starts buying your coffee, do you recommend that they get any special equipment to brew it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't want to be, this is where I don't want to be a snob, but there's equipment that people have. If you still have a glass pot coffee brewer when I come to your space, if you're not willing to move into the direction of better coffee, not just by buying better coffee, but producing it, it's not going to work. It's just not.
What did you have to buy?
Well, Doug gave me a whole list of like, okay, well, you need to buy the grinder because we didn't have a grinder. Yep. So obviously we're going to start grinding now. We're going to do a grinder.
Awesome.
They actually looked at we have a bun like pour over.
Yeah, the bun air pot pour overs.
So we had that already, so we don't have to buy that. But we decided after Mike and I, my partner Mike, and we met with Doug and Jefferson, decided then that the best way for us to serve the coffee was actually do little French presses at the table. So we can do that. So we order all that stuff. So we got all the French presses and the grinder and all this stuff. It should be coming in like Monday or Tuesday, and then we're going to switch over. So that's the way we're going to do it. They suggest a French press because then, it's at the table and it's going to be
at the table. There's a whole visual to it.
Yeah, it's a nice service piece.
Yeah, it's a good service. And you could set down like a little card that says, hey, this is the farm, or this is the farm.
We might have to get these mugs in.
And a little description. Nice. We could do that for you. We could put like a small little description of the coffee on the back with the face of the farmer, and that's that.
Yeah. I'm excited. I can't wait for all the stuff to come in.
That's my favorite part of doing that.
So the equipment that we find in restaurants typically is that old diner brew.
And I'll be honest, I don't think we would have come to that decision had we not visited and gone through the whole experience, like you were just saying.
Well, because you became educated on it,
exactly.
Where we were lackluster. Totally.
And we can start carrying decaf now, which we never did, which I thought was a myth or like some kind of fake coffee. But as I was
explained to us last
week.
As
I was explained.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of a cool process to make decaf coffee.
Yeah, you shouldn't feel bad if you want to drink decaf, apparently. So I can't even read. How do they make decaf?
So we use water processed coffees. So caffeine is water soluble. So basically, hot water removes the caffeine, strips it, runs through a bunch of carbon micron filters. Now, with this rinsing process, you're also flushing with hot water some of those flavor profiles. Those are caught in a different system. Then the caffeine is then removed. Anything of the flavored water profiles, aromatics, then gets flushed back into it, and they dry the coffee. Now, ethyl and CO2, I really don't want to use a poplar solvent, being CO2, or an ethyl acetate. So they tell pregnant women to drink decaf. Why? They're consuming generally 9 out of 10 coffees on the market are ethyl acetated decaf. It's a chemical, man. It stinks. It's toxic, nasty.
So that's a different way to make decaf.
So that's why we use water process. There's a company in Canada, Swiss Water, and then Mountain Water Process in Nayarit, Mexico.
Does it say any of this on the bags that you find on grocery store?
It should say water process, either water processed or Swiss water processed.
So that's what you should be looking for if you are pregnant in the store and you're looking to have your cup of
and you're looking
to
have coffee, yeah.
Okay.
Now, some women can't have it. I'm not saying that, oh, yeah, go ahead and all you pregnant women just go out and drink decaf because it's water processed. That would be your safer route. So just, once again, it's educating people so they know. So then I guess a pregnant woman could go to a doctor and say, hey, can I drink decaf if it's water processed and I only drink this much, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Talk about things that you don't really know about until you have that conversation. You're loaded with that info. What is the best way for somebody to produce a cup of coffee at home? Is it through the French press?
No. For me, I do pour overs at home. I'm doing it constantly. My wife and business partner Alicia makes them at home. We have our grinder at home. I make pour overs. I find it's one of the cleanest cups you can produce.
And with that, your grinds on that pour over, what do you prefer? Do you have this thing very coarse or?
No, it's actually on the slightly finer side. So basically I'm using, for 500 mil is usually what I make in the morning, a 500 milliliter pot. I'm using 27 grams ground, semi-fine, not too fine. About a 20-second bloom, which is getting all the coffee wet and allowing the CO2 to kind of bubble up and come off it. And then I'll do a couple passes circular, about 2 passes after that, filling the filter up to the top, letting it go down halfway, refilling it, and letting it go down fully.
Is there an appropriate method to how much water needs to hit XX amount of coffee to produce the correct pot or the best?
Depending on
pot?
what you're brewing, absolutely. Absolutely. So I use end product. I'm looking at end liquid product as a final number, not beginning. So I'm kind of tearing everything out to the end. So I'm looking at, for 27 grams, it's roughly 16 ounces on, I think 500 milliliters is roughly about 16 ounces. And I'm looking at about 3 minutes, 15 seconds.
As far as how much water is going through there at that point? Or that
and final,
you have to measure that 16 to
I
that
just
3
need
minutes.
to pour, and as it fills up, I kind of know where I need to stop as far as the coffee ground. I brew the same every day. So I know when I need to stop on that second pour that's going to pass through and give me that final product. If I screw up, I may throw just a tad bit of water in there just to top it off. But that's that's me at home. I don't suggest that for other people doing it. This is my way, how I do it at home and how I pull shots for myself. Very different than the training programs that we have at Coffee Labs.
So make sure you write all that down in case he asks you for a cup of coffee.
I just did jot this note down.
Yeah, but you can come by any day. Jefferson's gone to people's homes and done private lessons with people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like he's great, and you can come in anytime if you just want to know how to make a good pour over at home.
Yeah,
Come to the shop, man. And spend 20 minutes.
What about the
Field trip.
addition? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say field trip.
Yeah.
Another one.
Oh yeah, field trip.
What about the addition of like milk or cream?
So
Yeah, it sounded like maybe that was a.
no, my first cup.
Is it straight black?
No,
Oh.
no, man.
there you
There's half and half and a demi-tasse of raw sugar. For me, my first cup, it's comfort. It's not about being a purist. Like I'm not gonna. Hey, and I've been scowled and looked at, and, hellfire's been rung down on me from other coffee people. Honestly, it's not your palate. It's my palate. There's something that with anything you add milk or sugar to, there's a certain flavor profile it's going to bring out and generally will enhance a flavor based on the fat content, the sugars in the milk, blah, blah. It's comforty. I like it. I enjoy it. Now, when I go back to the shop, it'll be a full, the rest of the cups will be black. At night, believe it or not, I'll do 3/4 decaf and a shot of espresso in there. And then a little cream and a little sugar. Because it's at night, even though I do have a monstrous sweet tooth, that will kind of hold me over because it's like kind of desserty for me, warm and comforty. So, yes, I'm a purist, and I would just love to have straight up espresso bar, screw you on the coffee, drip coffee, you come get espresso and you leave. Couple bar stools. That's it. That's where the hardcore purist comes in. But then you got to realize this is a drink that brings comfort and warmth to you when you drink it. There's a habitual kind of presence about having that. You're always used to having that coffee, and it's when you have it, you feel better.
I use coffee not as a caffeine stimulant by any means, but to put pants on in the morning and get out of bed. It's like my ritual. That's
My
what
wife
do
and I don't talk in the morning.
until you have your cup.
100%.
Love it. See, it's not weird. Someone told me I was weird one time because I was like, I have to go get coffee. They go, why can't you just lounge around? I go, no. It forces me to get out of the house if I don't make it home.
It forces me into the shower. I mean, just kind of getting up and doing the day.
Yeah.
Mine's on road trips. Every time we have to drive somewhere, we'll just stop and get a cup of coffee. And Nicole will be like, we don't have time. I'm like, we're getting coffee. I can't. You want me to drive? Coffee.
And there's times where I've walked out on the road and been like, bought espresso and got a coffee at places, and I'll never go back and say anything. Just leave it. And we're done here. And sometimes I do that just to see what other coffee people in the area are doing. What we do is very different. Like, our coffee buying practices are very different than other coffee roasters in the area. I don't know anyone on this side of the county within us. There's a larger, they do specialty and commercial in Port Chester. But out of everyone that I know within the industry and community around here, there's not anyone that's spending more time on the ground or buying coffee the way we're buying it. They're just not. Everyone's doing good work. We just took it a different route.
A different level almost, it sounds like, too. Like,
we pride ourselves on our coffee, our relationships, and the sustainability that we kind of focus on with all of that.
so, Mike, tell them where to find you and come check the place out, too.
Oh, hit us up in Terrytown, 7 Main Street. We're right next to the music hall.
Website.
We're open 7 days a week. You can go to coffeelabs.com.
Instagram action.
Instagram at coffeelabs1_.
Boom.
Sweet. Thanks for coming.
through and
Thank you guys,
educating
man.
us.
That was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more we could talk about coffee.
Yeah, it sounds like
It's
it.
insane.
I'm definitely going to come check you guys out. This is awesome.